Instructor Zurin stood at the front of the Grand Hall, her sharp eyes scanning the room. It was the first time the Galactic Council had agreed to consider Earth species for membership, and she had been chosen to evaluate them. As a seasoned instructor and guide for countless other species, she was no stranger to first impressions. However, today, something felt different. The humans, small, fragile creatures from a planet still struggling with its own survival, were unlike any species she had ever encountered before. Zurin's antennae twitched slightly, a nervous habit she had developed over the years. She studied their faces, trying to read their thoughts, but there was something elusive about them. Their expressions were a mixture of hope and uncertainty. There was no arrogance in their posture, no claim to power like other species she had seen. Instead, they stood before her as if they were waiting for permission to exist in the greater galaxy. "Why are they here?" she murmured, her voice low and more to herself than to anyone else. Beside her, Cur 5, the scanner, processed the question, its screen flickering softly as it spoke in its usual calm, mechanical tone. "The humans have requested entry into the Galactic Council. They seek knowledge, growth, and the chance to build relationships with other species." Zurin raised an eyebrow. "Knowledge, growth? They can't even keep their own planet from collapsing. Their technology is barely advanced, and their history is filled with conflict and chaos. What makes them think they belong here?" Cur 5 processors hummed as it responded. "Their history is indeed troubled, but the potential for growth is undeniable. The humans have learned from their mistakes in ways no other species has. Perhaps they seek a chance to correct what they have done wrong." Zurin shook her head. "Potential? They're on the brink of self-destruction. Their world is plagued by war, pollution, and division. If they haven't learned by now, what makes us think they will ever change?" The humans, standing quietly before her, were listening intently, their eyes full of hope and trepidation. One of them, a woman with dark hair and a determined gaze, stepped forward. Zurin was taken aback by the confidence in her stance. How could someone from such a fractured species exude such certainty? "We don't claim to be perfect," the woman said, her voice steady. "We know our planet is broken and we've made terrible mistakes, but we are learning. We are trying to make things better, to fix the damage we've done not just to ourselves, but to the entire galaxy. We want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to help." Zurin studied her for a long moment. Her words rang with sincerity, but Zurin wasn't sure whether she believed them. She had seen so many species come and go, promising peace, claiming to have learned from their mistakes, only to fall back into the same destructive patterns. What made these humans any different? The woman continued, "We don't have the power or the technology of other species, but we have something else. We have a belief in unity, in cooperation, in working together for a better future. We've made mistakes, but we're learning from them. We've fought wars, but we're trying to build peace." Zurin's antennae twitched again, and her sharp eyes flickered toward the humans standing quietly behind the woman. They were so fragile, so small in comparison to the towering beings she had encountered from other civilizations. Yet there was something undeniably human about them, something raw and real. Could it be possible? Could a species as imperfect as humanity actually possess the qualities needed to contribute to the greater good of the galaxy? Zurin shook her head slightly, pushing those thoughts aside. "You speak of unity," she said, her voice still skeptical. "But your history is filled with war, division, and chaos. How can you possibly expect to bring peace to a galaxy that has existed for millions of years?" The woman paused, a slight smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We understand. We know we're not ready, but we want to try. We want to make things right, even if it takes a lifetime." Zurin felt something stir inside her, a tiny seed of doubt, perhaps. She had been taught that the galaxy was full of perfected species, each with its own advanced technology, wisdom, and power. But these humans, they didn't seem perfect. They didn't even seem capable of surviving in a galaxy so vast and ancient. And yet their words, their raw honesty, sparked something she couldn't ignore. The woman's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, Zurin saw something unexpected: hope. It was small, fragile like the humans themselves, but it was there, shining in the depths of their eyes. Something told her that this hope was not like the empty promises she had seen in the past. It was real, and it was powerful. Zurin turned away and walked to the window, gazing out at the stars. The vastness of the universe was humbling. In all her years of studying and guiding, she had never been faced with such a difficult decision. Could she really turn away a species that seemed to be on the edge of greatness, even if they didn't yet have the means to reach it? Was it her place to decide who belonged in the galaxy and who did not? Do you think they have a chance, Cur 5? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cur 5 paused, processing the question. Their path is uncertain, but they have something none of us possess, a willingness to change, to adapt, to learn from their mistakes. That is a power in itself. Zurin turned back toward the humans. They were still waiting for her decision, their faces filled with a quiet, patient anticipation. She could feel the weight of her role as their judge, as their evaluator. Could she deny them the chance to prove themselves? As she stood there, contemplating, Zurin realized something. The humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, nor were they the most advanced. But perhaps they had something more important, the will to evolve, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Zurin's mind swirled with confusion as she stared at the humans in front of her. Their words echoed in her ears, but she still couldn't shake the doubt in her heart. She had seen so many species claim to be different, to be better, only to fall back into old habits. What made these humans so special? What made them believe they could bring anything meaningful to the Galactic Council? As the silence stretched on, Zurin turned to her assistant, Cur 5. The scanner had been with her for years, always precise, always logical. If there was anyone who could make sense of this situation, it was him. Cur 5, Zurin said, her voice softer now but still filled with frustration. Do you believe they belong here? Their planet is on the verge of destruction. Their people are still fighting each other. How can we let them in? Cur 5's screen flickered briefly, its lights dimming for a fraction of a second before it responded. Instructor, you are right about their planet's struggles. They have a long history of conflict, poverty, and violence. But they are evolving. They are learning from their mistakes. Zurin shook her head, still uncertain. Evolving? They're barely surviving, Cur 5. What makes you think they can ever contribute to something as complex as the Galactic Council? Cur 5 paused, as if processing the weight of her words. The humans are not perfect, Instructor, but their potential is undeniable. Their history may be filled with wars and division, but they have a unique ability to change. Their willingness to learn from their mistakes and grow is unlike any species I have encountered. Zurin's eyes narrowed. Change? They've been given countless opportunities, and they still destroy themselves with greed, hatred, and war. How many times must they fall before they understand? Cur 5's voice remained calm, but there was an undeniable conviction in it now. The key lies in their resilience, Instructor. The humans don't give up. Despite all their failures, they fight to survive. They learn from their struggles. That's something most species can't even comprehend. Zurin clenched her fists, her frustration building. But they're still so small, so fragile. Their technology is primitive. Their planet is dying. How can we put our faith in them? Cur 5 lights flickered again, this time in a steady pattern. It is not their power that makes them worthy, but their heart. They are driven by a desire for peace, for cooperation. Unlike others, they are not seeking to dominate or control. They want to build, not tear down. Zurin was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the humans standing before her. She had heard the same arguments before, species who believed they could do better, that they were the ones to change the galaxy. But they had all failed. How could these humans, so young, so broken, be different? Just then, the woman from earlier, the one who had spoken with such confidence, stepped forward again. Her eyes were filled with sincerity, and Zurin felt an odd tug in her chest. She didn't know why, but the woman's words seemed to reach something deep inside her. We don't ask for your trust, the woman said, her voice steady but warm. We don't expect you to believe that we're perfect. We've made mistakes, many of them, but we're trying. We're trying to build a future where we can all live together in peace. We want to learn from you, from all of you. Zurin's heart sank as she listened to the woman's words. There was nothing grand about them, nothing that seemed like a promise of greatness. But it was the truth in her voice that struck Zurin to the core. The woman wasn't asking for forgiveness or approval. She was simply asking for a chance to prove that they could do better, that they could be better. Zurin felt her gaze soften as she looked at the humans standing behind the woman. They weren't perfect, not by any means. But they were here, willing to try, willing to face the darkness within their own history. And wasn't that what mattered? As if sensing her change in heart, Cur 5 spoke again, this time with a different tone, one that almost seemed to carry an understanding. Instructor, the humans may not be ready, but they are the ones who will shape the future, not through their strength, but through their ability to change, to learn, to heal. Zurin took a deep breath, her mind spinning. She had spent so many years studying the galaxy's greatest civilizations, learning from the most advanced species, always measuring their worth by their power, their technology, their knowledge. But now, standing here, she realized that maybe she had been looking at it all wrong. Power wasn't everything. The ability to change, to learn from mistakes and keep moving forward, maybe that was the true strength. She glanced back at the humans. They weren't asking for power. They weren't asking to be the greatest. They were simply asking for a chance, and maybe, just maybe, that was all they needed. Zurin stepped forward, her heart heavy but her resolve beginning to solidify. "I see it now," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "The path you walk is uncertain and your world is still broken, but there is something in you, the desire to change, to build something better. I may not fully understand it, but I cannot ignore it." The humans stood silently, their faces filled with hope. Zurin could see it now, the same hope that had flickered in the eyes of countless species who had tried and failed before them. But there was something different about these humans. They didn't look for excuses, they just looked for solutions. Zurin nodded slowly, her decision beginning to form. "I will recommend that the Council accept your petition," she said softly, though she knew her words carried a weight far greater than any formal decision. The woman from earlier smiled, and it wasn't a smile of victory, but one of quiet determination. "Thank you," she whispered. As Zurin watched them, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The humans had made mistakes, yes. They weren't perfect. But in their imperfections, they had something the galaxy needed: the ability to change, to evolve, and to build a better future. Maybe, just maybe, they were exactly what the galaxy needed. The day after Zurin's quiet decision to recommend the humans' petition, something shifted within her. The thoughts that had kept her awake the night before swirled like a storm in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about what Cur 5 had said, their potential, their capacity for change. Zurin had always believed that strength came from power, technology, and superiority. She had been trained to value those qualities above all else, but now she wasn't so sure. As she walked through the council's vast, empty corridors, she couldn't help but notice the difference in the way she was perceiving everything. The marble walls that had once seemed so grand now felt cold, distant. The bright stars visible through the windows of the council chambers had always filled her with awe, but today they looked less like distant dreams and more like distant reminders of how little she truly understood about the galaxy. Zurin entered the chamber where she would present her recommendation. She wasn't alone. Several council members were already seated, their eyes fixed on her, waiting for her report. Among them was Zickler, a high-ranking member of the Orlean species, known for his sharp mind and harsh judgment. His species had once dominated the galaxy with their technological advances, but their empire had fallen centuries ago after a failed attempt to conquer the galaxy. Zickler's cold gaze fixed on Zurin as she approached. "Have you reached a conclusion, Instructor Zurin?" Zickler's voice was heavy with skepticism. His species had always held a firm belief in the superiority of strength and power, qualities that the humans had not yet proven they possessed. Zurin paused before speaking, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. "Yes, I have," she said, her voice steady but carrying a weight she hadn't expected. "I recommend that we accept Earth species into the Galactic Council." A low murmur spread through the room. Zickler's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Are you suggesting that we accept a species with no advanced technology, no experience in galactic diplomacy? They can barely manage their own planet." Zurin took a deep breath, her eyes unwavering as she faced the council. "That's true. Their technology is not advanced and they've made mistakes, many mistakes. But what I've seen in them is something no other species in this council can claim: the will to change. They have fought wars, destroyed their environment, and divided their people. Yet they continue to learn. They continue to push forward to rebuild, and that, in my opinion, is something we cannot overlook." There was a long silence as the council members considered her words. Zickler's face remained hard, his arms crossed. "And what makes you so sure that they'll be able to change, Instructor? What evidence do we have that they are capable of anything beyond their own destruction?" Zurin felt a pang in her chest as she remembered the humans' faces, their quiet determination, their willingness to admit their flaws. She thought back to the woman who had spoken to her so honestly. There had been no pretense in her words, no desire for power or superiority. She had simply wanted to make things right, and Zurin believed that was the key. "The evidence is in their history," Zurin said, her voice quieter now but filled with conviction. "They've survived. They've overcome war, famine, and environmental collapse. They've learned from their mistakes. It's not about their technology or their power. It's about their ability to grow, to evolve. They are not perfect, but they are willing to try. And that, to me, is the most valuable trait a species can have. Zickler scoffed, clearly unimpressed. And what happens if they fail again? What happens if they bring their chaos to our doorstep? Zurin stood tall, feeling the weight of the responsibility she carried. Then we help them, she said simply. We guide them as we would guide any species that shows the desire to learn. We offer them the support they need, not just for their own sake, but for the sake of the entire galaxy. Because if we turn our backs on them now, we may be turning our backs on the future. The silence in the room deepened, the council members exchanging glances. There was a hesitation, an uncertainty. Zurin could feel it. They were all used to dealing with species who came with power, with wealth, with knowledge. But these humans, these fragile, imperfect beings, they had something different. Zickler's cold gaze shifted from Zurin to the humans who had come with her. The woman who had spoken before stepped forward once more. Zurin noticed how the woman held herself, confident but still carrying the weight of uncertainty, of knowing that this was their one chance to prove themselves. Her eyes met Zurin, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. "What do you believe we can offer?" Zickler asked, his voice still skeptical. "Why should we let a species like yours into our ranks?" The woman stepped forward, her voice clear and calm. "We're not asking for power or to dominate. We're asking for a chance to learn. We want to build a future where we can work together with you, with all of you, for the betterment of our people, and for yours. We may be flawed, but we believe in growth. We believe that, with time, we can be part of something greater." Her words were simple, but they were the truth. Zurin saw it in the way the woman spoke, in the way her people stood by her, not asking for greatness, but for an opportunity. Zurin's heart felt heavy as she stood before the council. She could feel the pressure of every eye on her, the weight of their judgment. But she knew what she had to do. The decision was hers to make, and she had already made it. "The vote is simple," Zurin said, her voice stronger now, filled with certainty. "We can either close the door to Earth species, or we can open it. And if we close it, we risk losing something that may be more important than we realize. Their potential. Their desire to change. We cannot ignore that." As the council deliberated, Zurin could only hope that the galaxy would see what she had seen in the humans. That sometimes, true strength wasn't about power or technology. Sometimes, it was about the courage to try again, no matter how many times you had failed before. And perhaps, just perhaps, this fragile species from Earth was ready to take its first steps toward greatness. The future of the galaxy was unfolding before her, and with a quiet breath, Zurin knew the journey had only just begun. The chamber grew heavy with silence as the council members deliberated. The weight of the decision hung in the air, a palpable tension that was hard to ignore. Zurin stood at the front, her gaze fixed on the humans who had come with her, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. This was it, the moment that would determine their future in the galaxy. The Council's decision would decide whether Earth species could truly take their place among the stars. Zickler, the Orlean Council member, spoke first, his voice cold and unyielding. "Your species is fragile," he said, his eyes piercing. "You have no advanced technology, no standing in the galaxy. Your planet is broken. How can you possibly contribute to the Council? Why should we give you a seat?" Zurin braced herself for what was to come. The humans had already endured so much rejection, so much doubt. She could see the strain on their faces. The woman who had spoken to her before, the one with the dark hair and quiet strength, stepped forward. Zurin noticed her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady, clear. "We don't expect you to accept us because of what we have," the woman began, her words deliberate, as if she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. "We don't ask for your approval because we're strong or powerful. We ask for your trust because we're willing to change, to learn from our mistakes, and to work together." There was a softness in her tone, but also an undeniable conviction. Her eyes met Zickler's, unwavering. "We're not perfect. We've torn our planet apart through war, greed, and ignorance, but we're learning. We've seen the consequences of our actions, and we're trying to heal. We know it will take time, but we want to be part of something bigger, something better. We want to work with you, with all of you, to build a future where peace is not just a dream." Zurin could feel the room shift slightly as the woman spoke. There was something in her voice that cut through the skepticism, something that felt real. It wasn't grand promises of power or technological marvels, but simple, raw honesty. The woman wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a chance. Zickler, who had been silently observing, sneered. "And what makes you think that you are the ones who can bring peace? Your species has known nothing but violence for centuries. What can you teach us that we don't already know? The woman didn't flinch. She took a deep breath before answering. We've learned the hard way. We've fought wars, destroyed our environment, and hurt each other more times than we can count. But we've also learned the importance of unity, of working together for the greater good. We've seen the destruction caused by division, and we're trying to fix it. It's not easy, and it's not perfect, but we're trying. Zurin could hear the sincerity in her voice. The woman's words were simple, but they carried weight. Zurin knew what it meant to fight for survival, to struggle through mistakes, but she had never seen a species so willing to admit their flaws and face them head-on. It was an honesty that was almost foreign in the galaxy. Most species had their pride, their defenses, but these humans, they were stripped of any pretense. Why should we trust that you won't repeat your mistakes? Zickler asked, his voice hard, his skepticism deepening. The woman stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. Because we've seen the cost of our mistakes. We've seen the pain, the loss, the damage, and we don't want to repeat it. We're not asking for your trust based on our promises. We're asking for a chance to show you that we can be better, that we can learn, that we can grow. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment there was a quiet stillness in the room. Zurin watched the humans closely. They weren't pleading for mercy or favor. They were speaking from a place of genuine desire to change. The woman's voice was steady, but Zurin could see the exhaustion behind her eyes. The weight of their past, their mistakes, was heavy, and yet they carried it with an almost unspoken strength. Zickler turned away slightly, his eyes narrowing as he processed what he had just heard. There was something in the woman's words that seemed to have affected him, but he wasn't ready to admit it. He was too proud, too set in his ways, but even he couldn't deny the sincerity in her plea. Zurin stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. The humans may not have the power you're used to, Zickler. They may not have the advanced technology, the military might, or the knowledge that other species possess. But they have something we all need: the willingness to change, to admit that they have failed, but to continue striving for a better future. That is something no other species has shown us in such a raw, real way. Zickler's gaze flickered to Zurin, then back to the humans. For a long moment there was no sound in the room, only the weight of his judgment hanging heavily over the council. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter than before. Perhaps, he muttered, almost reluctantly, perhaps there is something to be said for their persistence. Zurin felt a flicker of hope, but she didn't let herself relax just yet. There was still much to be done, many obstacles to overcome. The human's journey was far from over. And yet in that moment Zurin realized something important. The galaxy needed more than just power and strength. It needed the willingness to admit mistakes and to learn from them. And in that, the humans had shown more promise than anyone could have imagined. The woman stepped back, joining the others behind her, and for the first time, Zurin saw the quiet hope in their eyes. They weren't asking for much. They were simply asking for a chance. And as Zurin looked at them, she couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, that was all they needed to begin with. Zurin sat in the quiet of her private chamber, the cool light of distant stars streaming through the window. Her hands were clasped together tightly, and her thoughts swirled in an endless loop. The decision was looming, heavier than any she had faced before. She had recommended the humans to the Galactic Council, but now she felt the weight of that choice on her shoulders more than ever. The other council members, especially Zickler, had been openly skeptical. Would they accept the humans, or would they reject them as they had rejected so many others before? Her mind drifted back to the humans, their faces, their voices. The woman who had spoken so earnestly to Zickler, the quiet strength in her words, the humility. There was no arrogance, no false pride. Just a simple desire to learn, to grow, to make a difference. But could that really be enough? Zurin had spent so many years guiding the more powerful species, the ones with fleets of ships, advanced weapons, and knowledge that reached across galaxies. Those species never had to prove themselves. Their strength, their technology, their age, those were the things that made them valuable in the eyes of the galaxy. And yet here she was, considering a species so young, so flawed, and so fragile, that it seemed almost impossible they could ever stand on the same level as the others. Was she making a mistake? Had she been too quick to listen to the words of hope the humans had spoken? There was a knock at the door, pulling Zurin from her thoughts. She stood and opened it to find Cur 5 standing in the hallway, its mechanical gaze as unreadable as always. The scanner was a quiet presence, always observing, always processing, never swayed by emotions or doubts. But now, Zurin could see something in the way it held itself, something that made her hesitate. Cur 5, she said softly, stepping aside to allow the scanner to enter. What is it? The scanner's lights flickered, and its voice, though emotionless, seemed to carry a hint of understanding. "Instructor, I sense that you are troubled. You have been questioning your decision, have you not?" Zurin's eyes lowered, her thoughts heavy with uncertainty. "Yes," she admitted. "I've made the recommendation, but I can't shake the feeling that I might be making a terrible mistake. The humans, they're not ready. They're weak, fragile. Their history is one of violence and division. How can they possibly belong in the Galactic Council?" Cur-5 didn't respond immediately. Instead, it stood still, processing her words, analyzing the patterns of doubt in her voice. "Your hesitation is understandable, but I ask you, Instructor, to consider this. The most powerful species in the galaxy have not always been the ones to lead. Strength is not only defined by technology, age, or military might. Sometimes it is defined by the will to change, to evolve, to rise above the mistakes of the past." Zurin's eyes widened, and she stared at the scanner, as if hearing the words for the first time. "Are you saying that the humans have something those other species do?" Cur-5 lights dimmed in a subtle pattern, as if reflecting on the weight of the question. "Yes, Instructor, the humans have shown resilience in the face of failure. They have a rare quality, a deep desire to improve, not for the sake of power or pride, but because they understand the consequences of their actions. Their potential to bring unity, to change the way the galaxy thinks, is more valuable than you realize." Zurin's mind raced as Cur-5 words sank in. She thought of the humans again, their faces, their sincerity. They weren't asking for anything except a chance to prove themselves, and it wasn't about their strength or their ability to conquer. It was about their willingness to learn, to admit their flaws, and to strive for something better. Could it be true that this fragile species, with all its faults, had something the rest of the galaxy did? Zurin walked to the window, staring out at the stars. She had always believed in power, in strength. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that what the galaxy needed wasn't just another race of conquerors, another empire looking to expand. What the galaxy needed was change. A new kind of leadership, one built not on dominance, but on unity, cooperation, and the willingness to adapt. But was she ready to believe that the humans could lead the way? "What if they fail again, Cur-5?" Zurin asked, her voice heavy with doubt. "What if they cause even more damage, more destruction? What if they can't change?" Cur-5 processed the question, its lights flickering thoughtfully. "The risk of failure is always present, but consider this, Instructor. Every species, every civilization has made mistakes. Even the greatest empires in the galaxy have faltered. But it is not in the falling that defines them. It is in their ability to rise again. Humans have shown time and time again that they will rise, and that, I believe, makes them worthy of a chance." Zurin turned to face Cur-5, her gaze searching its mechanical form for some hint of certainty. "You truly believe they can change the galaxy, that they are the ones to bring about this new kind of leadership?" Cur-5 lights flickered softly, almost as if it was reflecting on the question itself. "I believe that they are capable of more than we have allowed them to believe. Their potential is greater than the sum of their past mistakes. They have the will to learn, to improve, and to inspire others to do the same." Zurin stood in silence for a long moment, processing everything that Cur-5 had said. She had always thought that leadership came from power, from strength, but perhaps that was not the only way. Perhaps the galaxy could be led by a species that was willing to evolve, to learn from their mistakes, and to build something better for everyone. With a deep breath, Zurin made her decision. She had seen the potential in the humans, and now, more than ever, she believed in their ability to rise above their flaws. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but it was a road worth traveling. "Prepare the council," she said quietly, turning toward the door. "The humans deserve their chance, and I believe they will take it." As she stepped out of her chamber, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. The future of the galaxy was in motion. And perhaps, just perhaps, these small, fragile beings from Earth would show everyone that the greatest strength lies not in perfection, but in the courage to change. The council chamber was filled with tension, as if the very air itself was holding its breath. Zurin stood at the front, her hands clasped behind her back, her gaze fixed on the large table in front of her. Today, the Council would make their final decision about whether to accept Earth species into the Galactic Council. The room was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy, leaders of ancient empires, wise philosophers, and diplomats with centuries of experience. Their gazes were sharp, calculating, waiting for Zurin to present her final recommendation. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment that would decide the fate of Earth species. Her mind wandered back to the humans, their quiet determination, their willingness to admit their flaws and try again to learn from their mistakes. Their faces, filled with hope, filled her thoughts once more, but there was also doubt. The risk was enormous. If the Council accepted them, the humans might fail. They might bring chaos to the galaxy instead of peace. But then again, how could she turn her back on them? She had seen something in them, something rare. They weren't asking for dominance, for power. They were asking for a chance to prove they could do better. The doors to the chamber opened, and the humans entered, their eyes filled with a quiet hope. Sarah, the woman who had spoken so honestly to Zickler, led the group. Her face, though tired, was still filled with purpose. The others followed her, their eyes focused, but not with the arrogance of a species that expected to be granted power. They were simply there, standing as equals, waiting for the verdict. Zurin took a deep breath and walked to the front of the room, addressing the council with her calm, steady voice. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," she began, her words carrying the weight of her years of experience. "I stand before you today to present the humans of Earth. They have come to us not with promises of greatness or power, but with the willingness to change, to learn, and to grow." Zickler, the Orlean Council member, spoke first, his voice cold and dismissive. "You cannot be serious, Zurin. These humans have nothing to offer us. Their technology is primitive, their world is on the brink of collapse, and their history is one of war and division. How can they possibly contribute to the galaxy?" Zurin's gaze hardened. She had expected this. Zickler had always been quick to judge, always focused on power and strength. "Their world may be broken, Zickler," Zurin replied firmly, "but that is precisely why they belong here. They have faced their flaws, their mistakes, and they have fought to survive. They are learning, evolving, and their potential for growth is something that no other species has shown to the same degree." Sarah stepped forward then, her voice steady and confident. "We are not asking for power," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "We are asking for a chance to work together with all of you to learn from the galaxy's wisdom and share our own. We are not perfect, but we are willing to change. We want to build a future where we can all live in peace." Her words, simple as they were, carried a weight that seemed to resonate in the room. There was no grand speech, no plea for mercy, just the quiet confidence of someone who knew that change was hard but necessary. Zurin could see the other council members watching her, waiting for her response. She knew that their decision would shape the future of the galaxy. But as she looked at the humans, standing before the council with nothing but hope in their eyes, she knew what her answer would be. "Sarah speaks the truth," Zurin said, turning toward the humans. "The galaxy needs more than just power. It needs the will to change, to learn, to evolve. The humans of Earth may not be perfect, but they have shown us something that many of us have forgotten: the ability to grow beyond their mistakes, to rise from the ashes and build something better." There was a long pause in the room. Zickler's face remained hard, but the other council members seemed to be considering her words. Finally, Zickler spoke again, his voice softer this time, though still filled with skepticism. "And if they fail again, if their mistakes bring harm to us all, what then?" he asked, his question hanging in the air. Zurin didn't flinch. She had prepared for this. "If they fail, we will help them. We will guide them, as we have done with countless other species before them. But we cannot allow our fear of failure to blind us to their potential. The humans may be fragile, but they are resilient. And that resilience is something the galaxy cannot afford to ignore." The council fell into silence again, each member deep in thought. Zurin stood still, waiting for their decision. She could feel the tension building, but she didn't move. She had done everything she could. Now it was up to the council to decide whether they would follow her lead or continue down the path of isolation and fear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the council members, a soft-spoken Arcanian, spoke. "Zurin is right. The humans may not have the strength we are accustomed to, but they have something even more important: the desire to learn, to grow, and to be better. They deserve a chance." Another council member, a Gorath, nodded in agreement. "If we do not offer them this chance, we risk condemning them to repeat their mistakes in isolation. The galaxy must be united, and if the humans are to be part of that future, we must give them the opportunity to prove themselves." Zickler's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. He understood the weight of the decision. The room was still, the tension almost unbearable. Finally, the council chairperson spoke, their voice strong and final. "The vote is clear," the chairperson said. "Earth species shall be accepted into the Galactic Council." A collective sigh of relief seemed to echo through the room. Sarah's eyes widened with surprise, then filled with tears. She looked at her fellow humans who stood frozen in disbelief. This was their moment. They had made it. Zurin smiled gently, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. The humans had shown that sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in power or technology, but in the will to change, to try again, and to hope for something better. As the chamber doors opened and the humans were allowed to step forward, Zurin knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had just witnessed the birth of something new, something powerful. The humans were no longer just survivors of their past. They were now part of the future. The chamber buzzed with the quiet hum of voices, and the weight of the decision still lingered in the air. The council had made its choice, but for Sarah and the others from Earth, it still felt surreal. They had come to the Galactic Council as strangers, as a species unsure of its place in the vastness of the universe. Now, they were being granted the opportunity to stand beside the most advanced and powerful civilizations in the galaxy. As the council members began to stand, signaling the conclusion of the meeting, Sarah felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, and a deep sense of responsibility. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. It had been so long since humanity had been given a chance like this, and they couldn't afford to waste it. Zurin, who had been a quiet presence through much of the deliberation, approached Sarah and her companions. Her usually stoic expression had softened, and there was a look of quiet pride in her eyes. "Congratulations," Zurin said simply. "You have earned your place here." Sarah took a deep breath, still trying to process what had just happened. "We haven't earned anything yet," she replied softly. "We've only been given a chance to prove ourselves. We have to do better. We will do better." Zurin nodded slowly. "Yes, but the fact that you even have this chance says more than you know. You have shown the galaxy something that many of us have forgotten, the courage to admit your flaws and the will to change. That is more powerful than any technology or army." Sarah's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "We've made so many mistakes, we've hurt so many people. What if we fail again? What if we can't do it?" Zurin's gaze softened. "Failure is not the end, Sarah. It is only part of the journey. The greatest civilizations in history were not built by those who never stumbled. They were built by those who fell and then chose to rise again. That is what makes you different from so many others. Your ability to try, to learn, to grow, that is your strength." As Sarah looked around at her fellow humans, she saw the same mix of emotions reflected in their faces. They were no longer just representatives of a broken planet. They were a new hope for the future. They had been given a chance, but now it was up to them to prove they could handle the responsibility. The council had voted in their favor, but Sarah knew the true challenge had only just begun. They were not accepted because of their power or their technology, but because they had shown that, despite all their flaws, they had the will to change, to build a better future. And that was the essence of what it meant to be a part of the galaxy, a part of something greater than themselves. "We can't do this alone," Sarah said, turning to face her companions. "This isn't just about us. It's about everyone. We have to learn from each other, share our knowledge, and work together. The future of our world and the galaxy depends on it." Her voice, though quiet, was filled with the same determination that had driven humanity for centuries. They had been through wars, environmental collapse, and struggles that had nearly torn their world apart. But they had also survived. They had found ways to rebuild, to adapt, to change. And now, standing in the heart of the galaxy, they had a chance to make things right, not just for themselves, but for everyone. Zurin smiled faintly, her voice filled with quiet encouragement. "You are not alone, Sarah. You will have the support of the Galactic Council. But remember, the true test is not in what you can take from others. It is in what you can give, what you can offer the galaxy, and what you can teach others. That is your legacy." Sarah nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. She understood now. The humans were not just here to receive wisdom, they were here to contribute to the greater good. They had knowledge of their own to offer, lessons learned through hardship and survival, through mistakes and recovery. They had the potential to bring something new to the galaxy, not through war or conquest, but through cooperation, understanding, and growth. For the first time, Sarah felt the weight of the responsibility sink into her bones, but it wasn't a burden. It was a privilege. They had been given the opportunity to be part of something far larger than themselves. And with that opportunity came the chance to finally heal the wounds of their past, to show the galaxy what it meant to rise from failure and work toward a common future. As the council members filed out of the chamber, Sarah turned to her fellow humans, her voice steady and clear. "We have a lot of work to do, but this is our chance. our chance to change the galaxy and to make sure that our past mistakes don't define our future. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of a species on the edge of something new. Sarah knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, failures, and setbacks, but they would face them together as a united species with the support of the galaxy at their backs. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the spark of hope. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. The humans had a place in the galaxy, and they would prove that they deserved it. As the humans left the chamber, Zurin stood quietly in the background, watching them with a sense of pride. She had believed in them from the beginning, but now, seeing the way they had carried themselves in the face of uncertainty, she knew that the decision had been the right one. They were the future of the galaxy, not because of their power, but because of their willingness to change. The journey had just begun, and the road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time, Zurin had no doubt that the humans would rise to the challenge. And as she watched them walk into the future, she couldn't help but smile. The galaxy had just changed, and perhaps in ways they could never have imagined, the humans of Earth would lead the way.